Hi guys and welcome to Game On. I'm your host Violet and I'm here with my two guests.
Hello, I'm Ben. I'm a senior level designer from Lucid Games.
Hello, I'm Jake, also a senior level designer from Lucid Games.
Okay, and today we're going to be asking these two some questions about level design. So for the first question, so what is level design?
I've always thought of level design as you have like a bunch of systems and mechanics for whatever game you're making it for, because level design changes from genre to genre, and then you build a kind of sequence or a memorable section or chunk of the game, as your level. So,
Yeah, we were chatting about this because it's very hard to like define it because it's very different. But I think I'd probably go with a more like simpler. It is just like the creation of the world type thing, which obviously is very broad, but also very quite simple. It's quite a hard one to nail down, and everyone says something different as well. But yeah, along those lines.
Yeah. How do you define great level design? So what makes a level truly memorable?
I think it's because again, based on the game, but memorable levels to me are things where the concept is really simple, but it's quite striking. So it's something like the opening of Uncharted 2, the train sequence where you start and Nathan Drake's on a train, and then the camera pans and you realise it's a tutorial for the climbing section. It kind of puts you in the story and the narrative, but it instantly has you be a part of that world. Same thing with there's a COD 4 level called All Gillied Up, where it opens with a establishing shot of Chernobyl, and then one of the hedges stands up and it's introducing you to the ghillie suit and this kind of like behind enemy lines kind of feeling. But yeah.
Yeah, we're saying things like, to me it's like things like Titanfall 2 has some as well, where it just uses a mechanic and it uses it very well. I was saying to Ben earlier, like for me, some of those levels are also quite like nostalgia level, like things maybe I played when I was younger, that I still think are good examples of level design. They might actually not be, but because of nostalgia, I'm just like, okay, I remember this now.
Yeah.
It's like ingrained there.
To speak about the level that I actually find really memorable, see if you two agree with this, is like Elden Ring. When you open the door and instantly you're shown this massive landscape.
The opening to Limgrave.
Right? And the opening to Limgrave, and then on the DLC when you walk out of the chasm and then you see the whole plains. I just really enjoy
the opening to the Siofa River, right? When you're going down the elevator and you get that moment of like it's taking a bit too long and you're not too sure where you're going, and then it's an entire new zone. I think it's again those kind of impactful moments. I think is what kind of resonates and like it keeps it in my mind. I think.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because I think it's only creative usage of that. If you had those kind of wow moments everywhere, I think it lessens the impact. You can't just notice a technique like that and then use it across the entire game because it works.
Yeah. Having it everywhere would kind of spoil the point.
How do you balance narrative, player freedom, and gameplay pacing in your designs?
I think it's interesting because we both come from probably a lot more like open world. I mean, I've worked on quite a few games, but the most amount of work I've probably put in professionally is in like open world games. So that was definitely something we both had to learn to do on there. Especially in those terms of those games, just because you're coming from this large world where you can kind of approach anything from any. It's similar to like the Elden Ring example, like you can almost approach anything from anywhere, and you want to try and make those moments similar to that where. Okay, and I'm funneling the player through here, but from this point onwards, they can kind of do almost whatever. But it's quite a hard one to answer.
Sometimes that stuff develops dynamically. It's not necessarily that you have a concrete idea of what a space will be, but you know that you need, say there's a village or something, and you build up the village, and then as you start to discover like where the house is going to be and what maybe there's a house that can be enterable, then potentially it's a discussion with the team of like what should that place be, like what kind of elements, who lived here, like what's the surrounding details, like how can we kind of emphasize that, and it develops as like an organic process. It's not necessarily that you just know exactly like what the brief might be quite vague in that sense, and then you discover kind of what those elements are as you build into it.
And how do you design for different player types, so explorers compared to achievers?
So I was thinking about this recently actually. I saw a really good description from a level designer that worked on Dishonored 2, because it can be quite easy to think of just designing for these different player paths as like their own segregated things. So if you have, again, a game like Dishonored where it's like there's a combat section where if you get spotted by guards you can attack them, or and then there's stealth sections where you can kind of blink past different routes and find like gaps in like enemy vision cones and things. And it'd be really easy to think, well, the combat is going to be in this open field over here, and the stealth route is going to be like through that fence and then behind this guard tower or whatever. But I think the most effective way to account for the most player paths is to try and overlap them as much as possible. The combat route, so then they can like fade into each other dynamically. So if you do the stealth route and then you get spotted, well then you're kind of falling into the combat space, and then you can evade people and then go back to like the high rafters or whatnot that are above it. It's not necessarily like if they commit to the combat route without necessarily realising that's what they've done, that they don't feel too locked into that.
Okay, so the next set of questions are going to be about how you collaborate within the industry. So how closely do you work with narrative designers, environmental artists, and gameplay programmers?
I was going to say, I think it changed like project to project. I've had periods of like 9 months and stuff where I've basically just been doing my thing, especially level design, that first pre-production section where you're almost just planning the thing you want to do and you're getting it down, you're getting those steps. The bigger games you work on, the more you realise all these puzzle pieces will work together. So like the whole time I've been at Lucid Games, I've always worked with every other discipline, just about artists, programmers, like you name it, we're probably working together most of the time. I think I'm very lucky to have always worked with people that are just great to work with. So it's always been an easy process for me. Even though we're trying to achieve different things, I guess, on the project. Ultimately, we all want to make the same game, but obviously we're coming from different departments who are trying to achieve different things within our like results.
Yeah. I'd agree. I think, like I said, it changes project to project for sure. I've worked on sequences where you get like a narrative brief, so you get told like, again, this is what we kind of expect from the space, this is like where we're going to enter, this is where we're going to exit, and it's kind of on you to decide how you connect those dots up and how you make it interesting. I've had experiences where you're kind of paired with an artist, so it can really help, like, maybe I'll block something in and I'll kind of decide that there needs to be a route here or whatever else, and being able to discuss with the artist in real time as I'm making those decisions. They can kind of point out, well, actually, what if we have an archway here? What if we do this? What if we do that? And that's really valuable, I think, because then you start incorporating these elements that you might not have thought about, and it makes their job easier as well. And there's the back and forth on the other end where potentially they're kind of adding art and making like an area look really good, and you have to have a discussion with them saying, well, the reason this space was kept open, or like, the reason I needed a light source to be visible from here is for these reasons. And like 99% of the time you're going to be working with someone that's going to be open to that kind of collaboration and discussing these things and going back and forth. And I think that's like how you get a really good end result, is by collaborating and by working closely with these people. So
what challenges come from collaborating across different teams? Although it doesn't sound like if you work with right,
there definitely can be. I think the challenge mainly is trying to have an understanding of what they need from you. I think if you know a bit more about what an environment artist needs, you're going to be less likely to give them a room full of cubes and say, art this, right? That's not really conducive to a good working relationship, because ultimately you should be trying to keep in mind how to ease that transition as much as possible, because you want to make their job easier, because they're going to make your level look really good. And then the other way around, right? Like, you want to make sure that they understand, again, why the level plays the way it does. So when they add their art in, they're not necessarily reducing like the impact of the gameplay experience you've planned.
I know what you mean by that. It is just like it's the collaboration bit, like you said before. It's like kind of working out what the other person needs, and like the more you understand what they need and the more they understand what you need, it just makes it way easier, instead of every department fighting and being like, we need to be the priority. It's just a bit easier when everyone's kind of like in the same boat and understands like every team needs this thing to work, and you can kind of just make that happen.
It really helps to try and have like a bit of lack of ego in that sense, right? Like, obviously everyone wants to do a good job, and everyone kind of feels that their discipline or their contribution is the thing that like makes the game really special. So that's kind of why they've specialised in that, right? They want to make beautiful artwork, or they want to make a brilliant level. But I think you just have to kind of have it kind of click that you all want to work towards that good end result, right? So no one's trying to sabotage something you're trying to do by suggesting that something needs to change. That it's all just trying to accommodate each other's
all working towards the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's actually interesting, that, because I would have assumed that it would have been like really difficult to collaborate across so many teams, but
I think that, again, there's challenges generally, but I think you can just work through it as long as you're kind of open to compromising.
The only difficulty is only ever been from communication. I mean, like someone's done something and they haven't communicated it, and then you open the engine and all of a sudden half the world's gone or something like that, and you're like, what, where is this coming from? But I've been, again, fortunate that in 99% of situations that's not the case at all.
Yeah, and I mean, if it ever is the case, if there's ever anything that kind of does crop up, it's quite easy to like chase up, and again, a lot of the time it's just a mistake, or it never really is.
It's not like malicious.
Exactly. It's never malicious, right? It's always just kind of part of the process, and yeah.
All right. And can you share a time when you've had to scrap or change a level late in the development, and how was you able to handle it?
I have an example of this. Yeah, I worked on a project where I think like the hardware requirements had kind of changed. I think that might have been it, and that meant we could do more, which meant going back to the drawing board and remaking these levels. But I think sometimes it's easier just to scrap something and start fresh instead of going, okay, we've built this level and now we can make this 40% bigger. Let's just add to it. Sometimes it is easier to just drop the whole thing and be like, okay, let's just start afresh. Like, we know we've done this work. It is challenging because, of course, sometimes you might have done something for upwards of 6 months, a year, and then it gets like dropped. But yeah, you can't be too attached to your work as well. Like, it's something that once you make it, it kind of becomes the game's work.
Yeah.
Like, you might have done it, but everyone's gonna have their hand on it at some point. Everything's gonna change and stuff, so it's just easier to enjoy making the thing, and if it makes it into the final product, perfect. If not, it's there's nothing lost.
Yeah.
But that was definitely an interesting one on a project I worked on a while ago.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think when you're building something, the more you build, I think the faster you get at being able to realise like your ideas. And even if you've poured a lot of time into something and it ends up getting cut, it's not usually a reflection like on the quality of work that's being produced, right? And I think it can be quite challenging initially, especially when you're first starting, to not take it as that, right? Because obviously you pour so much of yourself into these spaces. But
you take it personally. You're like, no, I'm saying like, not you. You can take it personally.
You in particular take it really personally. So you learn not to, and I think it's like I said, it's I've had to work up for scope reasons. Potentially, you've built something really large, and you just don't have the time to finish it for like the art side or whatever else. Or maybe again, you get that initial brief or whatever it is, where they say we need this starting here and this ending there, and then the end changes, and now suddenly like the last half of your level needs to be something completely different. I think it's why level design and blocking out is actually so important, because you end up building kind of broad strokes, the general beats and things that you need. It's why obviously white box looks the way it does, because obviously it does need to change. It's actually fairly simple to do, and you can axe quite a lot and then redo entire chunks. You're not committing to like the finished artwork like as readily. Yeah,
especially when it's just cubes. That's kind of like what I was saying before about like portfolio pieces and things, and like when you're in this like 2D drawing mode, you don't have to commit to anything yet. You can just sketch things, and then it stops you from committing to something that maybe wasn't a good idea. And then when you get into 3D, you can actually try it out, and if it doesn't work, you just put some cubes down. Like, you can just move on.
Right, so the next questions are going to be about technical skills within level design. So what tools are essential for your workflow?
I think it's always good to know an engine and something that you can work in. I know something that helped me very early on that not everyone knows is things like Maya, like 3D packages. They're all like Blender. I never learned Blender. At university we learned Maya, and when I came to the industry, straight away I knew how to use this software I can build things in, and it was just quite good because a couple of people I worked with at the time hadn't used it, and they had to learn to use it, and I was able to get like this jump start on this level and do these things. And it's the same with actual game engines like Unreal, Unity. To be honest, for the longest time I only ever used Unity. I didn't use Unreal until probably like 4 or 5 years ago. It was all just Unity at that point. But I'd say essential things are probably things like game engines and like 3D engines, things that you can actually build stuff in. Don't know if you got any more to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree really. So I used 3ds Max at college, but I didn't really touch it for quite a while. So I'd used like Unreal and other game engines and things, but a lot of the kind of Unreal, for instance, is like a kind of more modern 3D engine. And a lot of engines kind of similar to that, like CryEngine or like Unity and whatnot, they all have very similar workflows. So when you learn one, it's not actually too hard to learn like one that's like an equivalent. I think modeling packages can be useful just for kind of niche cases, right, when you need something a bit more specific, like if you need a piece that you don't quite have, rather than like struggling to block it out of 80 cubes, you can just really quickly throw it together in Maya. Yeah, like adding that to my workflow, I think helped me quite a lot as well, actually. So I don't think it's like 100% necessarily from the get-go, but it's definitely just, you know, it's like a string to your bow kind of thing, right? It can only help. So.
How do you optimize a level for performance without sacrificing visual or gameplay quality?
So a lot of it comes in the planning of the level itself. Like when you kind of understand how a level needs to be optimized, in a more linear experience, that it's where you get stuff like you have a big open room and then you go around a corner, right? And like as you go around that corner, you can't see the things behind you. Well, then that's like where that's the space where you kind of unload a lot of that like heavier detail. Yeah, exactly. So like level streaming and things are useful to set up, but you would kind of plan for that potentially from the get-go. Like you just have to kind of keep that in the back of your mind of like, okay, this is going to be quite expensive. Like you have to be able to envision what the space is going to be when you're still looking at it in like the early stages. It can be quite difficult to optimize a level that hasn't had that care taken at a later point, but it's not impossible. It just means that you have to be a bit cleverer with like the kind of things that you cull. So it'll be potentially there's details off in the horizon that you like the player doesn't notice that they're not there, right? Because they can't see them, and it's like as they get closer and round corners and stuff, well then that's when you load in all the lovely foliage and things that there's a lot of like kind of debug tools in these engines that help you determine kind of what's actually more expensive and what's like, you know, really heavy. And it's kind of surprising, some like, you know, you'll find that really small assets you're not really getting much will be actually some of the most expensive things in the scene. And it's kind of making these trade-offs like later on, because ultimately you want the game to play well, right, and to run well. So it can be a shame to kind of sacrifice some of that visual fidelity, but then you also have dedicated kind of programmers and things, or like render programmers that their whole job is like maybe not even on the level side, it's to get it just to run better, essentially. And like the way things are rendered and whatnot.
Only do so much. At least from my experience of like seeing stuff, it's things like LODs and making sure if you've got something off in the distance that you can see, making sure it's a lower quality version, because you're not really going to be able to tell at a certain distance. Similar to the thing about like planning, sometimes you have levels or areas of games I've worked where you get to a certain section and you realise you can see so much from one viewpoint, and then that's where the decision comes in to either block that off or maybe change or make sure that the models in the distance are like a lower quality so that they run better. But that's one of those things where that's happened like late in development, and you have to almost, how do we fix this like in, you know, a cost-effective way?
I think one of the most interesting things to me is that sometimes those vista points, or like we were talking about Limgrave earlier, right? Sometimes it's so crucial to what you're trying to deliver that the team always like rallies together to say like, okay, this is running really badly. We've done as much as we can on the level side. Like we just have to get this to be performant. To like, we really want to keep this moment, and I think that's where lots of the other disciplines kind of collaborate together to really work on like, okay, well, how can we like squeeze blood from this stone essentially, just to really like nail down what we have. So. Yeah.
Is that like harder to do with open world games than it is with like a linear set game?
It comes back to that thing of like you can basically see everything from every angle type thing. Compared to like a very linear experience where, you know, it's controlled, and you know maybe if someone enters through door A, they're going to exit through door B, whereas in open world you might enter through door A and leave through door A, and you know all these different angles you can go, and you can see so much stuff.
I think that's where planning comes in there, right? Where like you kind of, at least in the open world, you know to be prepared for that. You know that like you can't necessarily, or you don't want to be able to see every point of interest from like one spot. So then maybe you'll sculpt like some terrain or a mountain so you can see the top of like an object. So even though the actual location when you get there might be like an entire town, well, when you're really far away, all you need to see is that initial like spire, right? Because then that's the landmark that the player uses to orientate themselves around and say, hey, look, the town's over there. But as far as like what's actually loaded in the game world, like you don't have to care about a lot of those objects. And open worlds can kind of be finessed and molded to really, even though they are open, you can approach it from any direction. You can kind of cheat a little bit and like force them down the routes you want them to go. Again, Elden Ring is a good example of that. It's open world, but it's actually quite like linear as far as how it segregates the zones, like Limgrave as opposed to the lake that Lucaria Ricaria is on. I don't know. I'm saying that the Magic Academy.
Yeah.
But essentially, that's it feels really open as you're exploring it, but really, when you look at how they've built the world, it's very deliberately like hidden past that initial castle that you
Like
get
where
to.
you've got to go through Stormvale to get to
Yeah,
the
exactly.
side,
Yeah, and even when you go around Stormvale, it's still like around Stormvale. Like you can't necessarily see all the stuff. But then it leads to moments where even optimizing can actually work in your favor. Where you get these reveals and things that you wouldn't get if you just could see everything all the time. So sometimes working within constraints can actually like help your design.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So.
How does designing for open world games differ from a more linear experience? I feel like we've just kind of answered that just then.
Yeah, I think to add to it, I guess it is that more. You just have to think about a lot more. Planning for an open world game is a big task as well. It's very different to. You almost have to work very well with people because we've had it in the past on a project we worked where we were basically working on areas right next to each other. Where we had to, there was obviously going to be a meeting point eventually where we had to meet and make sure those two sections seamlessly blended. Whereas if we were both working on individual linear levels, that never would have been the case because I'd be working on my thing that's completely separate from yours, and they'd be loaded separate, and you might play them separate. So it's just a lot more planning that goes into the open. I mean, it doesn't mean that there's no planning in linear, but it's just a lot more long-term planning to sort of make everything work in the same world.
Yeah,
area.
I think it's like to what Jake's saying. Like when you're building an open world as well with multiple level designers, everyone kind of has their own. Everyone has their own approach to how they build stuff, and you want the world to feel seamless. You want it to feel like one connected space. So on like where these areas like link up to each other, I think it is really important to be able to discuss with, you know, in Jake's case, obviously, if we were chatting about something, it would be like, okay, well, I have like a dead straight road. On where that seam links, well, then I would want Jake to be able to continue that road, so it still feels like it's a connected thing. And yeah, but then it's also like kind of the quality of the work that's being produced and whatever else. So maybe the detail or the density, or maybe Jake's got a really cool like side path, but then where again it bridges my area, I've got something else that doesn't quite work, and you need to make sure that you're adjusting to fit like the other person's needs as well, not necessarily just like what you kind of planned in your little quadrant, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, the next questions are going to be about the future within the industry. So, how has level design changed over the course of your time in the industry?
I think we kind of said about this earlier. Like, I've just seen more and more open world stuff and like larger levels and things like that. That's just from my personal experience of kind of what I've seen, like from what I've worked on and kind of where these things have gone. I'm seeing a lot of more open world level design, which I think you're like a kind of a similar case to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a rise in kind of larger worlds because everyone wants, you know, the 800-hour world. Everything's massive. I mean, you kind of saw it with a lot of open worlds in the kind of PS3 360 era, right? That like they all were kind of topping each other for size and scale. You're probably going to see it with GTA 6 as well, where they're going to say, you know, the Miami area they've built is like it's 6 times bigger than Los Santos or whatever it will be. I kind of wonder if it's going to swing a little bit the other way, where there's a bit of open world fatigue, because now every game is demanding that, you know, they're hiding thousands of things for you to find, but it's almost, you know, you're doing that over and over and over again, and it's like the tail on these projects is so long, it takes so long to build that world, that I kind of wonder if it's going to start swinging the other way, where you're going to start seeing more compact, more refined experiences, because there's been such an uptake in these just massive games.
Yeah.
I was going to say, even on a personal level, like games I like to play, I've completely swung from like open world stuff to like more linear level designs. Because sometimes, especially if you're doing this all day, like sometimes I don't want to think about this stuff, and it is just fun to go in and like, okay, you can have a little bit of exploration, but I kind of know where I'm going and where what to do next.
Definitely.
Yeah. How do you see the industry changing in the future then?
In terms of like level design. And,
in terms of not the whole industry.
Deep question. Level design. I don't know. Probably kind of like what you said there. Like it's swinging back to smaller, and I think this is just in general across the whole industry. Maybe swinging back to smaller projects with smaller team sizes and maybe more linear and more condensed idea. But
I hope so.
I mean, that's what I also hope. Yeah, as well.
I'd like to make some of them.
There's a smaller dev cycle.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think. But I mean, it's interesting though, right? Because it definitely feels like for quite a while now, publishers in particular, they're only interested in greenlighting projects that, they're going to be the next Fortnite or something, right? The kind of someone's forever game that's going to make the publisher like a silly amount of money. but then you can kind of see there's lots of releases recently where they release and within a week they're cancelled, they're removed from storefronts or whatever else. So I think that's definitely going to influence the kind of projects that get greenlit and get kind of funding and things like that, because it just seems silly that there's so many of these kind of investments that don't seem to be actually returning the time that it takes to build these like large spaces. So
they're only getting more expensive.
Exactly. Development costs are only getting higher as well.
Yeah, I think you're already starting to see this shift in indie development with these like horror games that are coming out. Like,
there has been like a weird thing recently where the same game has just been released. I know it's like Repo and stuff. Yeah, it's like the same games come up like 6 times.
But it sells really well.
Yeah, they always sell well, and it's almost like those friend games where you can you play with a bunch of people, which is just an interesting trend because it's similar to what's before like the kind of mid Xbox 360 era where there was so many 8-hour single player games. That was like the constant. Every month there'd be like 3 or 4 new games. But yeah, I kind of see it going that way.
Yeah. Alright, these questions are going to be a little bit more personal and about you two. So why did you enter the industry?
So I didn't really realise that, it sounds silly, I didn't even really realise that you could do game development when I started studying for it. It just happened to be that the college near me was offering game development courses. I always thought that I needed to be a bit more like maths heavy and programmer orientated to be able to contribute to video games. So when I realised that level design was like an avenue and I could build these kind of sequences and just have fun doing it and play it with people and whatever else, that's what really motivated me to just like work on my own projects and play with friends and that type of stuff. I'd like to be someone that builds one of those sequences we chatted about earlier, one of those kind of memorable moments and things that,
very similar to that. Like when I was a lot younger, I think I had like the idea of like graphic design or like games testing. Like I kind of knew what these things were, but I always just kind of assumed it was more technical based. And then kind of towards the end of university, like mid-level, I kind of realised that there actually is another area of this. Like games are made from all these different teams, and I guess I was able to find my way in there.
Yeah, it's kind of the same with me. I'm level 3 BA student in university, and then it's kind of like I didn't realise you could go into the industry just doing art type stuff. And then like here I am sitting talking to 2 people from the industry. It's like it's a really interesting.
It's also cool, like even though we're professionals in this specific genre, like there was like someone on the course earlier when we were looking, and they were doing concept art, and I was like, it was just blowing my mind because I was like, I'm in a professional sense, like I don't do concept art, so just seeing someone else do it, something that I can't even do, I'm like, this is so cool to see that there's a path for that, and
like
someone can get in that way.
In my class, like the person I sit next to does character art, I do prop art, and it's like I'll be working.
And also they're very different as well. You don't realise.
I'll be working on my little table, I'll look over and they've got a full character, and I'm like, whoa, I could never do that. That's crazy. But so what's your personal goal in the industry?
For me, it's always been like to work on something and give someone an experience that to a similar thing that I had when I was younger, where like I'll play something and I just think it's really cool. Even if I never know that someone's had that experience, I just like the idea that something I've worked on one day will hopefully influence someone to do like a similar little route, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess it's more of a philosophical answer than
No, I mean, I feel exactly the same way, really. I'd love to build something that, someone feels has, either inspired them or they think back on it fondly or, whatever else. No, definitely. I think,
Yeah. And so, what are your favourite games?
Favourite games? I had a picture, I have to narrow it down now. Probably, for me, it's probably like Bioshock is one of them, like Halo 3, I don't think what else comes to like mind. I'll go with those 2 for now. Yeah.
It's funny because I really should say shooters because that's definitely my kind of like my bread and butter as far as the games I enjoy playing and whatever else. But I think the more that I found that I enjoyed level design and things, I've definitely drifted more towards these kind of anything to do with creating stuff. There's like games like Townscaper or Tiny Glade or City Skylines or whatever else where I'd added someone from work on Steam and they thought it was funny that every time they'd see me come on a game it was something to do with just making levels. I was like, haha, my secret is I really enjoy it. So But I mean, I play lots of Counter-Strike and things, and again, shooters are enjoyable, but I think there's lots of different genres and lots of different games that you can get really cool experiences from.
Yeah. I know it's a bit like asking you what your favourite game is, but I'm pretty sure everyone in game design loves
Yeah,
all sorts
it
of
is the
games.
classic.
exactly.
It's like the second you get it, you're like freeze up.
Yeah.
Like, what is my favourite
I'm
game?
trying to remember what you
If
recently
anything,
played.
it's just trying to rank them. It's like trying
Yeah,
to pick
like-
one above the other. Yeah.
And to me as well, it's like, it's kind of nostalgia. I keep nostalgia keeps going back, but it's that thing of like, sometimes now I'm like, do I want to spend 40 hours playing a brand new game, or do I spend 8 hours playing a game I know is good that I played like 15 years ago, and I'll go back and do that again.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what's your favourite mechanic within a game? Or mechanics, or any?
I think for me, two like examples, like in BioShock, I think the reason why I really like it is like all the plasmids and stuff and being able to like change things and like how they interact. And another one of my other favourite games is Time Splitters 2, and it's not necessarily a mechanic, but the reason why I think I like that so much is that everything's so different. Like every single level is so different and unique, and actually has unique mechanics and little things where it just makes me want to play it again and like just experience that area. Yeah.
Do you have any favourite mechanics?
No, I don't think I have a good answer to this one. I'm sorry.
That's bad.
Yeah, nothing. I mean, there's just so many good games. There's so many good mechanics. Yeah, you could say to like something really simple that's really clever, like the portals in like Portal or something, right?
Yeah,
But it's like the amount you can stretch that one system with like the levels and things. But I mean, yeah, there's so many options.
Yeah. Right, these next questions are going to be about asking for advice for level designers. So the first one is, what advice would you give an aspiring level designer?
I think it's just enjoying the portfolio pieces you're making and just kind of having fun with what you're doing. I kind of mentioned it before, but all the portfolio pieces I've ever done, I've always tried to like pick a game that I like and take the mechanics from it and how the way the map's built, and then rebuild that and sort of have my own inspired level. Like I've done like an Uncharted level, a Left 4 Dead level, and they have obviously they're both completely different first and third person, they're both unique mechanics, and it just makes it really fun and allows you to add like an element of personality to your level design instead of it just being a generic thing that might get missed, along with everyone else's like levels and things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, have fun with it. I think make what you think is interesting as well, right? Like, try and find your own voice in what you're creating, because I mean, it's perfectly fine to be inspired by games that exist or things you find interesting. I think that can actually really help remove the kind of blank canvas feeling. But with all of my personal work, I've never really liked the idea of kind of rebuilding something I've already seen. I want to put my own spin on it. I want to make what I think is going to make it cool and unique and interesting, and just try a bunch of different stuff out. It doesn't always work, but I think that's part of the process.
Part of the fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
Are there any mistakes you see junior designers commonly make?
I think it would just be stuff with overscoping what they want to build. So maybe they just go a bit too wide. Like they'd have a really big plan for an area they're building. It has like 7 unique locations and a bunch of different. It goes on for a really long time. It's got all these like crazy set piece moments and things, and it's just trying to make sure you build within your own skill set, because it can be really daunting. I think that as soon as you stumble on that first step and then you kind of take a step back and you realise, like this first thing's really tricky, and I have all of this other stuff I wanted to do planned.
I've already hit it at this
Yeah,
step.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah. I think that can kind of kill your momentum. So I think you should still aspire to build things you think are interesting and whatever else, but just take it one step at a time, right? Like really just try and focus in on what you think is cool and build that, and then maybe attach something onto it later. But yeah.
I'd say like less, I guess, junior designers, but more like portfolios that I've seen for people aspiring, like wanting to aspire to be a designer. It would be to like really show off what you want to be. So if you're trying to be a level designer, make sure your portfolio or whatever is just actually focused on that, and then I can instantly see, okay, this person wants to be this, instead of having like a portfolio that has a bit. That's sort of mistake I see, where someone will have a portfolio that has like a little bit of everything because they've kind of done a bit of everything on a project, and it's quite hard to then sort of distinguish what this person wants to be, just from a glance at a website.
So adding on to that, then, if you've done all this like work of different varying like disciplines, and you want to show all that, how would you recommend they do that? Would you say focus on one definitely, or have a section in your portfolio?
I think you just section it. You just separate it out. You kind of say like, this is my level design work, this is on my character work, this is on my concept work, whatever else. I think, like Jake's saying though, if you're specifically applying to be, you know, for an internship as a game designer, for an internship as a level designer, for a role as a level designer, or whatever else, then that should be at the front and center. And I would even go as far to like hide the stuff. Like, you don't have to delete it or take it from your site.
Like animation work.
Yeah, exactly. Like stuff that's not necessarily relevant, because again, you're applying to this very specific niche, so they're going to want to talk to you about that and why you're applying and why you find it interesting. And it's cool that you've done enough stuff, and I think it is, you know, you should experiment and, like, you know, see what you find interesting. But it's all just, you know, depends on the purpose of it, really. So, yeah.
What's one piece of advice you wish you'd gotten earlier in your career?
It's a good question. Probably for me, it's like a lot of the things I kind of learned at university, I realised when I actually got into game dev, were very different. Like, when you're actually in game dev, it's obviously you've got time, you got like schedules, we were saying earlier, like time management and things, and kind of similar to like the overscoping thing, like trying to just make sure that I can keep everything within this brief and try not to overbloat what I'm doing, instead of just getting this big idea and being like, right, I'm going to do all this stuff. And you know, when you're in the industry, you're on a time schedule now. Like, things have to be done within X amount of time, and you know, there's money involved. It's not just a thing you're sitting at home making. So like, your work now starts to rely on like other people, and other people rely on what you're doing. And it's just kind of understanding that collaborative process and getting that it's not just you anymore, it's you and all these others and a whole company behind you. But yeah, definitely down that route.
I think on the collaborative process side, when I was a student at least, and when I was still learning level design things, I was working individually for like 99% of my work. And something I definitely learnt over time, just generally from talking to people, but I think it took a little bit for it to kind of really sink in, was that whole idea of like, well, it's not just my thing anymore. It's, you know, I'm working with an artist to, again, make it as good as it can be and whatever else. And yeah, it was just like I think you kind of figure it out over time anyway, but I've definitely seen it be something that people struggle with, right? Where they come in and they start their job, and then they're just so used to, like, you know, because as an individual, you have to do all of the art, you have to do all the lighting, you have to do all the presentation. You don't necessarily just have to do the block out, because that's not the most, you know, it's not always the best way to present your work. But it's to, you know, just to kind of realise that when you're in a professional environment, it is different. You're collaborating as part of a team, and you know, you should kind of be open to that.
Is that like what you were talking about, where it's not yours anymore? It's
exactly. Like, and it obviously still is yours to an extent. It's still your idea, and you're still executing on it and whatnot. But it can only get better by collaborating, being open to that. And I think it's completely natural that when you're working on something to feel maybe like, you know, a bit insecure about, well, this isn't quite good enough, and I've got to work on it for another few weeks before like I can show it to anyone. And the more that you kind of break that down, and you just get more comfortable with showing people work in progress stuff and discussing, well, this is why I've done this and this is what I'm trying to achieve, you can open up those conversations, and you can, like, you know, open yourself to people that have a lot more experience than you, just to say like, oh, why didn't you try this, why didn't you try that? And again, so much of I think my own work and whatnot has been improved by having those talks, and especially if you've been staring at something on your own for quite a long time, it's so easy to miss some like really fundamental details just because, you know, you've been kind of isolated a bit too long. So yeah.
Right, so that's been this episode of Game On. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll tune in next episode to see someone else that we've got on. I'm not going to spoil it, but you'll see it when they're on. Check out the links in the description for socials. So anyway, bye.
Cheers. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you for giving your time to watch our first episode of the podcast. The plan for this next segment is to be played at the end of each episode, showcasing different students' work to give them the opportunity to show industry specialists and get their name out into the industry. Our first piece is by Sherry Erskine, who specialises in environment design and creating 3D models for those environments. This model was created using ZBrush, then textured in Substance Painter utilising the high to low poly workflow. This model will be used in a beach scene for her Unreal Engine 5 project. This next set of work is a medieval furniture asset pack created by Violet McCarthy using Maya and Substance Painter. These models will be used to create a medieval tavern scene using Unreal Engine 5. Following this are assets created by Mason Burke using Maya, Substance Painter, and Substance Designer. The wooden door was created for an environment piece and the cabinets are for an NHS project. Our final pieces of work for the showcase were created by Daniel Barge. He has created a tool, weapon, and companion using ZBrush, Maya, and Substance Painter. These models were created to be used in his survival game demo. This is the end of the student showcase segment. We will be continuing to showcase other student work in future episodes. See you next time.